I was dead. At least, that's what the news said. Car crash. No survivors. My name in the obituary. Flowers on my doorstep. And a grieving husband who didn't shed a single real tear. Not because he was in shock, but because he already had someone warming my side of the bed. And when she showed up to the funeral wearing my favorite dress, I knew I had been right to die. But what they didn't know was, I wasn't in that car. And I'd already changed the will. Rebirth is funny. It doesn't come with candles or cake. It comes with silence. Watching the world pretend you're gone while they show their true faces. My husband's grief lasted exactly 72 hours before he moved her into our home. She wore my perfume, used my teacups, scrolled through my tablet like it had always belonged to her. The staff called her Mrs. Caldwell, and he let them. They didn't waste time. He filed for probate, thinking he'd inherit everything. But the lawyer, my lawyer, delivered a shock instead. A will, recently updated, leaving 90% of my estate to a women's shelter, and the rest locked in trust. His face twisted like he'd tasted something sour. Hers, pale. She thought she had married into wealth. But I'd rewritten the ending before the story even began. She took it personally, of course. Blamed the lawyer. Blamed the courts. But I watched from a safe distance. Hair dyed, eyes behind sunglasses, as she cracked under the pressure. No more designer bags. No more spa days. And the worst part, no access to his money, either. He was broke. And the lifestyle she had copied so perfectly vanished. She snapped, started showing up at charity events, pretending to be me, telling people I had trained her, that she was honoring my legacy. It was sick. It was surreal. But the worst part wasn't that she wore my face. It's that some people believed her. I realized then I had to make a choice. Watch quietly or make sure the mask shattered in public. So I fed her the fantasy. Through a burner account, I leaked tips to influencers. The widow of David Caldwell is launching a tribute foundation. I let her walk right into the spotlight. Cameras, articles, staged tears. And just when she had everyone fooled, I pulled the last string. I leaked a single image. Me, alive, very much alive, holding the real deed to the Caldwell estate. She was at a gala when it happened. A reporter asked about the photo. "Is this you?" they said. Her face went stiff. She laughed. Denied. "Photoshop," she muttered. But panic bled through her voice. Within hours, half the guests had Googled my name and found the obituary mysteriously flagged for removal. Questions started swirling. Who was the woman wearing Elaine Caldwell's face? He called her a liar. Publicly. Said she deceived him. That she claimed to be acting out of grief. But it was all a game. She screamed back. "You told me she was gone." And that's when the cameras caught it. His hand around her wrist, his voice raised. The public didn't like it. Sponsors pulled. Police started asking questions about the crash. And the more they fought, the more the world remembered me. But the real twist came days later, when one of her old debts caught up with her. A man she'd conned before, an ex she left broken and bankrupt, showed up at her door, thinking she was still Elaine Caldwell. She answered the door in my coat. And what happened next? Well, I didn't plan that part. But karma has a wicked sense of timing. She got what was coming to her, while pretending to be me. I didn't stop it. I didn't rush to correct it. Because for once, someone else was paying for the lies told in my name. And all I had to do was disappear a little longer. She was hospitalized. A fractured rib. A bruised ego. And a face that no longer looked like mine. Bloated from lies. Broken from consequences. The press called it a case of mistaken identity. But I knew better. She had one in my life. She had worn it like a costume. And for one brief, brutal moment, she got the ending she thought I'd had. And I just watched. My husband didn't visit her. Not once. He gave a statement instead. Said she had misled him. Claimed she faked her grief, her loyalty, even her love. It was rich, coming from a man who had rewritten our entire marriage the moment he thought I couldn't speak for myself. But now, the story was slipping. The lies weren't landing. And the house of cards was caving in on them both. Meanwhile, I was living quietly under a new name in a rented apartment 3 cities away. I had cashed out early, moved assets long before the crash. No one suspected a thing. People grieve in strange ways, after all. And mine looked a lot like revenge. Every time I saw her name trending lower, every time a tabloid ran a headline about the widow's imposter, I sipped my tea a little slower. I was alive, and she was unraveling. The lawyer called me once just to ask, "Do you want to come forward now?" I said no, not yet. I wasn't done watching. She still had more of my name to pay for. And he, my husband, had more silence to drown in. The man who once called me his anchor now flailed for control in the media, his statements getting messier, his interviews more desperate. She tried to sue him, said he promised her security, a future, a family name. But the prenup she thought he'd never enforce was airtight, and the fact that she signed it under the impression that I was dead, well, that made things a lot harder for her, especially when the lawyer revealed he'd received a second will, one with very clear instructions, one with a sealed video file attached, one only I could have made. That video was my voice. Calm, steady, undeniable. If you're watching this, you know I'm no longer here. But before the vultures gather, let me make one thing clear. You cannot take what I've built without burying me properly. And I'm not the kind of woman who stays buried. The video aired on national television. No edits. Just truth. And suddenly, the world went silent. She screamed that it was AI, deepfake, a stunt. But her bruises, her past scams, and her shaky history spoke louder. And him? He started drinking, appeared in public looking gaunt, worn, paranoid. The man who once curated our perfect image was now reduced to scandal blogs and pity tweets. And me? I smiled, anonymously, in a crowd that no longer remembered his name without mine. But it wasn't enough to just ruin them. I needed to remind the world who I really was. I donated in my name, quietly, to shelters, to women's programs, to places that honored real survival, not performance. And slowly, my name began to rise again, not attached to drama, but to strength, resilience, legacy, because the world may have mourned me once, but I was far from finished living. The footage of my video didn't just trend, it echoed. Women across the country reposted it. This is how you do a comeback. She didn't scream, she planned. Buried, but not broken. I didn't need to say a word. My legacy was louder than their lies. And with every view, with every post, I felt less like a ghost and more like a legend. Reporters started asking questions they should have asked years ago. Why had my husband filed for probate so quickly? Why had the crash investigation been so rushed? Why was she in my house days after my death? Whispers became headlines. Headlines became probes. And finally, probes turned into charges. Fraud, perjury, tampering. They both thought they were safe. But when the truth starts breathing, it doesn't stop chasing. The court unsealed my assets. The foundation I had created, quietly, intentionally, was thriving. The will was clear. She got nothing. He got audited. And the public, they finally saw the picture clearly. A grieving widow replaced by an actress, and a husband who was never mourning, just calculating. They tried to flip the script. She claimed abuse. He claimed manipulation. But the world had moved on from their noise. No one was buying the drama. And I didn't need to defend myself. I had already done it while dead. That's the beauty of planning. By the time they notice, it's too late to stop you. I visited my old home once. Drove by slowly, sunglasses on. The windows were shuttered. The garden I once loved was dying. Even the lights seemed dimmer. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a tomb of bad decisions. And I wasn't going to resurrect that life. I was building something new, with my own hands on my own land. One of my old housekeepers contacted me. Said she never believed the story. Said she saw the look in his eyes the day after my funeral. Too relaxed. Too free. She said she stayed only long enough to watch the imposter mess up everything. Then she walked. I always knew you were smarter than them, she said. You never raised your voice. You raised your walls. I smiled. She was right. The more I distanced myself from my old life, the more I realized how small it had been. All the charity galas, the curated Instagram posts, the elegant dinners, they were masks, just like the one she wore in my place. And once I saw through it all, I couldn't unsee it. That life didn't die with me. It died before me. I started journaling again, not to document pain, but to mark progress. Every day, one line, one moment of peace, a breeze through the window, a song I hadn't heard in years, a memory I could finally recall without hurting. I was reclaiming space, not just physically but emotionally. Slowly, fully. She was arrested. Not for the impersonation, ironically, but for a past crime. Credit card theft. Multiple identities. She had left a string of broken people behind her. I wasn't the first woman she tried to become, but I was the last. And this time, the name she stole burned her on the way down. As for him, he fled. No interviews. No court appearances. Just disappeared. Probably living somewhere under a new name, hiding from headlines, from lawsuits, from himself. I didn't chase him. He wasn't worth it. My story was never about his punishment. It was about my freedom. I bought a small cottage on the coast. Nothing extravagant, just space for me and silence. The kind of place where the sea speaks louder than gossip, and no one knows your name unless you want them to. For the first few weeks, I barely unpacked. I just breathed. Every wave that hit the shore sounded like a heartbeat I thought I'd lost. I stopped checking the news. I didn't need updates on their fall. My victory wasn't measured in their losses, but in the peace I finally felt without them. I didn't need to be seen. I didn't need to be praised. I had been both the storm and the survivor, and that was enough. I changed my name legally, not to hide, but to choose. For the first time in years, I wasn't someone's wife, someone's property, someone's shadow. I was just a woman with a second chance. No curated past, no controlling partner. Just my mind, my hands, and a life that fit the shape of me. I took up woodworking. Strange hobby, maybe, but it taught me something about strength, about shaping something from scratch, about knowing where to sand, where to cut, and where to leave the grain untouched. It reminded me that broken things aren't useless, they're just waiting for the right hands. Once, a neighbor invited me over for tea. She was older, soft-spoken. Asked about my past, gently. I smiled and said, I used to live a life full of mirrors. Now I live near the ocean. It's harder to fake your reflection here. She didn't press further. Just nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. I started writing under a pen name. Stories of women who were counted out. Women who disappeared, only to return stronger. The books didn't become bestsellers, but they found the right readers. Messages came in. This saved me. I cried at every chapter. I saw myself in her. And with every reply, I healed a little more. My photo never resurfaced. No one ever put two and two together, not in the way that mattered. My name in the papers faded. The scandal died like most scandals do, loud, then quiet, then gone. But I was still here, unfolding like a new bloom in late spring. I hadn't just survived. I had evolved. One morning, I saw a girl on the beach reading one of my books. She had no idea who I was. She cried softly at the final page, then closed it and held it to her chest. That moment, worth more than any courtroom win. I had reached her, not as Elaine Caldwell, not as a headline, but as a voice. I didn't build a new empire. I didn't need to. I built a sanctuary. For myself. For the parts of me that once begged to be heard. My power wasn't in reclaiming the past. It was in choosing what to carry forward. I left the anger behind, took the wisdom, left the name, took the soul, because I had been worn like a mask. used like a nameplate, buried like a secret. But I came back. And now, no one gets to wear my face but me. I got a letter one day. No return address. Just my name, my new name, in careful handwriting. Inside was a simple note. You were right to disappear. I would have done the same. There was no signature, but I knew the hand. It was hers. Somehow, from somewhere, she'd found a way to speak without speaking too much. I didn't reply. She no longer existed in the world I had built. Let her drift in the past where she belonged. Sometimes I wonder what they tell themselves now. If he rewrites it all in his head, convincing himself that I set them up, that I was cruel, that I tricked them. But I don't lose sleep over that, because the truth doesn't need believers. It just needs time. And mine aged beautifully. A journalist reached out to write a feature on women who disappear. Said she wanted my voice. I said no. I told her the loudest story I ever told was the one I never had to narrate. That story is mine. Not content. Not curiosity. Just legacy. She understood. Or pretended to. Either way, she left me alone. I don't live in hiding. But I live quietly. I've learned the difference. I go to markets. I plant my own herbs. I laugh with people who never knew the woman I used to be. And somehow, they love me without history, just for how I am now. I used to beg for love like that. Now it arrives without asking. I mentor young women online. Not as a guru, just as someone who made it out. I teach them how to read contracts, how to protect themselves, how to spot men who love their silence more than their voice. I tell them the world doesn't reward the obedient. It rewards the awake. And slowly, they start to rise. One of them asked me once, "Did you ever forgive him?" I said, "No, but I stopped needing to punish him." That's the thing about growth. It's not always about making peace. It's about making space. And once I made space for my own life, there was no room left for his memory. There are nights I wake up from dreams where I'm still trapped in that house. Still wearing that old name. Still listening to someone else tell my story. I sit up, take a breath, and remember that version of me is gone. She didn't die in that car. She was never even in it. She just stepped out quietly and left them to grieve their illusions. I still wear red sometimes. Not the muted red he liked, but bold red. Fire red. The kind that says, I'm not trying to blend in anymore. It used to be my revenge color. Now it's just my truth. A little dangerous. A little defiant. Entirely mine. There's peace in knowing they'll never fully understand what happened. That they'll argue about it in whispers for years, wondering how it all fell apart. The answer was simple. I stopped letting them write my ending. And now, the story isn't about who wore my face. It's about who finally wore her own, with pride, without apology. I visited the ocean again on the anniversary of the crash. Not to mourn, to mark it. 1 year since the world believed I was gone. 1 year since they buried the woman they thought they broke. I stood at the edge of the shore, the waves crashing with the same rage I used to carry. But this time, I didn't feel pulled under. I felt steady. A small boy ran past me, laughing, calling out to his mother. She scooped him up and kissed his cheek. That moment hit me harder than any betrayal. Not because I missed having children, but because I had missed innocence. That kind of love, simple, honest, pure. The kind I'd never been given in my old life, but the kind I could still learn to give. I adopted a dog, a big one, clumsy, loyal. He sleeps at my feet when I write and growls at thunder like he's protecting the entire house. I named him Chance, because that's what he gave me. Another reminder that even broken things can be loved, especially when they stop hiding. Once, I looked up my old name online, just to see. It was buried under newer scandals, newer faces, louder tragedies. And in that moment, I smiled, because I was no longer attached to the noise. I wasn't a trending headline. I was a woman who disappeared and decided to stay gone. One reader emailed me and said, "Your stories feel like home." I printed that out and pinned it near my desk. Not because I needed the praise, but because it reminded me of who I write for now. Not for editors. Not for headlines. For the ones still waking up in borrowed identities, unsure if they'll survive it. I tell them they will. Not because it's easy, but because it's possible. And because if I could come back from being impersonated, betrayed, and buried alive in someone else's fantasy, then anyone can. All it takes is one decision. I am done being silent. The local library asked me to give a talk. Nothing too dramatic, they said, just about storytelling. I stood in front of 12 women and one shy teenage girl, and I said, stories aren't about what happens to us. They're about what we choose to do with it. That girl came up after. She whispered, I want to disappear too. I said, then disappear, but come back better. And that's what this was all about. Not revenge. Not reputation. Reclamation. I didn't need to ruin their lives. They did that on their own. I just needed to reclaim mine, step by step, with clarity, with fire, and with peace. Some days I still ache, but I never doubt again. The woman they thought they buried never came back. Because I'm not her anymore. She cried too much, gave too much, believed too much. I am the rewrite, the rebirth, the one they thought was gone, who now owns every page.